So welcome to everyone. Welcome to Canadian Medical Student Interest Group in Neurosurgery. My name is Mohammed, and I'm a second-year medical student at UBC, alongside with my friend Pedram, and alongside Salman, who will be a second-year medical student at McGill. CAMSAN is pleased to share our third event of the Women in Neurosurgery Lecture Series called Personal Experiences in Balancing Family and a Surgical Career. This unique opportunity brings together mothers at various stages of their career and allows for an honest reflection on personal relationship, professional endeavors, pregnancy, medical leave, and forming a family as a surgeon. Medical students or anyone interested are welcome to join this panel and have their most pertinent questions answered by our panelists. The themes will be on background questions, personal life, and motherhood and maternity. The structure will be about 30 minutes of PowerPoint slides from our panelists, followed by a 50-minute Q&A. And then we will be followed by structural questions and a second Q&A of about like 10 to 15 minutes. So I'm going to pass the stage to my friend Pedram to introduce our panelists tonight.
Hi, everyone. Thank you again for being here. And we're really, happy and grateful to have our panelists joining us today and putting some time away from their busy schedules to share their experiences and invaluable insights with respect to motherhood and maternity in a surgical career. So I'm going to start with introductions to Dr. Smith-Forrester, and then we can essentially proceed to her slides, that she had some things to share with us as well. So just a quick introduction. Dr. Smith-Forrester completed her medical school at the University of British Columbia's Northern Medical Program, graduating as valedictorian. Prior to medical school, she completed her master's degree in neuroscience, also at UBC, and a Bachelor of Science in Neuroscience at Dalhousie. During her master's, she studied the use of positron emission tomography, or PET, tracers as potential biomarkers in the study of traumatic brain injury and neurodegenerative disease. She also has extensive experience and academic interest in training undergraduate and medical students in quality improvement methodology, and hopes to continue integrating these practices into each phase of her training and medical career. Outside of medicine, Dr. Smith-Forrester and her husband enjoy adventure-seeking experiences, including skydiving trips and trekking around the world. Closer to home, time is spent making her two chocolate labs are living their best lives. So without further ado, Dr. Smith-Forrester, the floor is all yours. And yeah.
All right, thank you so much. I am really appreciative of everyone taking time out of their Friday on a long weekend to come and join us for this chat. I think Pedram has covered so much of the introduction. I really just had some slides that were the pictorial representation of all of those things, but I can share that quickly with you, and then happy to move right along. Okay. So everyone can see these slides then?
Yes.
Wonderful. So I can start by saying I am finishing my second year in Dal's neurosurgery program, and I am currently on maternity leave. Just thought I'd throw in a photo from my last day in the OR. This is working with the head of our department, Dr. Clark. I was able to keep operating up to 38 weeks pregnant. So I was there because I wanted to be, not because there was any obligation from my program, but felt really good and wanted to be a part of this until the very, very end. So was able to keep going and loving every minute of it. As mentioned, I am a graduate of UBC's Northern Medical Program and was the first from the program to go into neurosurgery. And what's unique about that is UNBC is actually the only program at UBC that does not have neurosurgery immediately accessible to the students. So there are no neurosurgeons in Northern British Columbia. So that influenced how I chose my electives and how I built my CARMS application for the specialty. It was also mentioned that one of my professional interests is in quality improvement, both with respect to quality improvement initiatives, but also the training of medical students and advocacy for integrating this into medical curriculum. So I continue to do that from Dalhousie, and I do continue to lecture at UBC and supervise UBC students who do quality improvement projects. But while I've been at Dalhousie, I've been able to continue merging those interests in quality improvement and neurosurgery, and have taken on projects like ERAS protocols, which is working with a team on enhanced recovery after spine surgery to try to optimize patient outcome and work towards minimizing hospital stay, et cetera. I also have gotten involved with research teams that are working on making surgery more environmentally friendly. So I'm delighted that I'm able to continue merging my two interests together, and Dal has been very supportive of that. Outside of medicine, as mentioned, I am a new mom. So this is my son, Finley, and perhaps one of my favorite photos of all time. I am married and have my two fur babies, Maya and Kova. And my little guy in the bottom corner, that's us. Just on Wednesday, we were attending our neurosurgery curriculum teaching. Again, this is something I'm choosing to do. It's not something that I'm obligated to do, but Finn and I like to tune in Wednesday mornings for a little academic session. Definitely a thrill seeker and love my adventure travel and trekking. So my husband and I have been on some pretty neat adventures around the world, and the less well known a place, the more our desire to go there. So we've been able to find ourselves in some pretty interesting spots, like north of the Arctic Circle, and trying to get down to Antarctica one day. Do enjoy a good high altitude skydive. This one is in New Zealand over the Remarkables. And I'd say my husband and I are also pretty dedicated rugby fans. So we will always seek out a good chance to go to a rugby sevens game or a rugby World Cup. The personal stuff aside, I think we'll get into this more throughout the conversation, but talking about the trajectory to neurosurgery and what my path looked like. And I can say my path was certainly the road less traveled. For anyone who has not had an ultra linear academic path, let me assure you that that is okay. My path was very circuitous, and maybe I will just check in and see. Pedram, would you like me to keep going, or do you want to address this later on?
No, absolutely. Feel free to go ahead.
Okay. So one of the questions that was asked of us was, what was our path into neurosurgery? And so if I can take you back, I'd say that, my path is very, not only circuitous, it's diverse and interesting. I think I had a seed planted in my mind about neurosurgery when I was very little, but then it kind of dissipated in a sense, and it came back in university. But before that, I was actually on a fire crew. And so I was an initial attack wildland firefighter for 3 summers in university, contemplating how I was going to get to med school and what life was going to look like later on. But I'd say reflecting on this, as we are so often asked to do, like how our experiences shape our future career path. When I look at firefighting, this was an adventurous, diverse experience with, high stakes at times, very team oriented, physically demanding of your time because your whole summer was spent on call. So there's ironically a lot of parallels to surgery. Perhaps I just didn't appreciate it so much at the time. After that, I had done my undergraduate degree at Dalhousie, and as I was finishing up my 4th year, I stumbled into a research opportunity with Dr. Ivar Mendez. And that's one of the functional neurosurgeons who's actually now head of the Department of Surgery in Saskatchewan. His research interests focused on deep brain stimulation and spinal cord stimulation. And so I spent the summer working on a clinical database, but I was also present when the surgical patients came in for programming of their implanted devices. So this was the opportunity to actually see the direct impact that the implanted device had on a patient's quality of life. You were able to either completely resolve or mitigate the symptoms that the patient struggled with, which were incredibly debilitating movement disorders or chronic pain. And I think seeing that direct impact and how happy these patients were was inspiring enough that it set me on the path to functional neurosurgery. I will say that I also had some wonderful advice from Dr. Mendez at this time, because there's a part of you that looks at this very talented individual. Dr. Mendez, if you have the opportunity to ever meet him, he is exceptional in so many regards. He is like a talented photographer, talented artist and sculptor and philanthropist, etc. And you kind of stand there wondering, like, how do you become someone that gets into this career with so many accolades? And I remember so poignantly how he said, do not compare yourself where you are now to someone much later in their career. And I guess that little tidbit of advice always stuck with me. And it was something that, you know, I carried with me throughout my training. And second, he also said, the road to neurosurgery is a marathon. And so if you aren't enjoying every step along the way, then, you know, you should perhaps look at something else, and don't always focus on the end goal. You have to enjoy the path to get there. So again, like words that just kind of resonated with me at each step in my training. And I kept saying, like, I'm still enjoying this. This is what I want to do. So I would move on to the next step in, you know, either my electives or my CARMS application, etc. One other little tidbit that came up after that experience, I actually had the opportunity to do a research scholarship at the Mayo Clinic. So I moved down to the US and spent 8 months working in a lab, which was a phenomenal experience. If anyone has ever been there, Mayo Clinic is kind of like Willy Wonka's world of medicine, but I think this was another very inspiring step in my path. Afterwards, we moved around a bit and I ended up in Australia. And then after Australia, I came back to UBC and started my master's degree in neuroscience. And from there went to UBC Med. So I guess in a sense, it's kind of interesting that my path started at Dalhousie in neurosurgery and now has come full circle and I'm back. But I'm delighted to be a part of this team. So I will stop there and pass this over to Dr. Pendleton. And if there are any questions that came out of that, I'm happy to elaborate.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Smith-Forrester, for that wonderful presentation. Just a note to our audience, if you have any questions at any time, just feel free to post it in the chat. But I think as someone has mentioned, we'll have a dedicated, a Q&A portion after the presentation so that you guys can ask your questions. I'm going to take just a quick minute to briefly introduce Dr. Pendleton, and I'll then pass it on to her so that she can also share her slides as well. Dr. Nicole Pendleton is currently a PGY1 neurosurgical resident at the University of Saskatchewan in Saskatoon. Before starting medical school, she initially trained as a pharmacist, and while working for 4 years in the field, she had 2 children who are now ages 5 and 6. When she was on maternity leave with her second child, she decided to apply to medical school and pursue the career that she always wanted, which is to become a neurosurgeon. So Dr. Pendleton, the floor is all yours. I think you're muted.
Yeah.
Oh, I just said all my best things. So yeah, I just had a few things for the introduction. I just had a few slides as well, kind of my path to neurosurgery. So I grew up in Saskatchewan, which is where I'm currently completing my residency. And and grew up on a farm with lots of my cousins around. We had kind of a family farm. Everybody lived around the same like household or homestead, and it was a really good experience growing up. And there is kind of where I attribute learning how to work hard and just persevere when things get tough. And I think that's really served me well in medical school and residency for sure. And then I went to the University of Saskatchewan in Saskatoon for a pharmacy degree initially. And I completed my pharmacy degree there. Then me and my husband moved to Alberta, where I started practicing pharmacy in a community pharmacy. And I'd always actually wanted to go into medicine, but I didn't really have anybody, any mentors in the medical field. I didn't have any family. I didn't know any physicians at all to help me kind of navigate the world. And it seemed a little bit daunting. So I just kind of shelved that. I kind of always got the message that it would be too hard to ever, have a family or have any kind of social life if I pursued a medical career or a career as a doctor. And I think I just got some initially, like early on, some bad advice in that regard. But as I went through university and then started to work in the field of pharmacy, I started to meet more people in the physicians and this sort of thing, and really got a different perspective that maybe I didn't get the full picture of what it might look like as a physician. So when I was working in pharmacy, I found that it was rewarding. I really liked people and the patients I had, but I didn't have enough clinical work. And that's really where my interests were. So after my first maternity leave, I actually had kids very close together. They're like 13 months apart. And that's partly because I wanted to go back to school. And I didn't want to, I wanted to have more than one child. And I thought maybe having a child during medical school might be a little bit too tough with a toddler running around. So we had 2 kids close together, and then I ended up getting accepted into medical school. So we moved back to Saskatchewan, and I completed medical school in Saskatchewan. In between my 2 kids, and I think I got a picture. This is when I was in pharmacy, and then this is my daughter when she was brand new baby. And then 13 months later, had a son who is a brand new baby. And then this is me kind of thinking, oh, what am I going to do? I liked pharmacy. I was a manager at the pharmacy that I was working at that time. And I just decided when I had my son that I would start studying for my MCATs. And that's what I used my maternity leave for. So I kind of knew at that time that I was pretty driven to complete this, or like kind of follow this path, because that's kind of all I could think about. I was basically just raising two babies and studying for MCAT. So, and I was happier than I ever been. So this is me and my 2 kids when I first started medical school after our white coat ceremony. So on the left there, my son is 11 months old. He actually took his first steps on my first day of medical school. And my daughter is 2, almost 2 at that time. And then on the right-hand side there, my son, this is when I graduated medical school, and we didn't have a celebration because everything was locked down kind of during COVID at that time. So they mailed us our degree, and this was the day I got mailed my degree. And we tried to like do a recreation of the picture. And my son's almost too heavy to hold at that point, and my daughter grew about a foot. So and then this is kind of what my life looks like now. So spend a lot of time in the operating room. We have a lot of family around in Saskatchewan, and my kids and my husband there, that's the most recent shot of them. They just set up our pool, our like above ground pool in the backyard. So this is kind of how I spend my days. Some bedtime stories are read with me being on call and my daughter having masks on during a Zoom call, but that's just life these days. and I couldn't be happier in residency and having the job of raising children as well. So that's kind of all I had. I think Dr. Radic is here to introduce herself now too.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Pendleton, for that awesome presentation. We love seeing these pictures, so thank you for sharing that with us. And yes, of course, so we have, last but not least, we're so honored to have Professor Radic join us today, and in sharing some of her experience as well. So maybe I'll just give a quick introduction, and then I'll pass on the floor to her. So Professor Julia Radic is a pediatric and general neurosurgeon practicing in Saskatoon. She completed her medical school degree at Queen's University in Kingston and her neurosurgery residency training at Dalhousie University in Halifax. She completed a Master of Public Health degree at Harvard University in Boston and her pediatric neurosurgery fellowship training at BC Children's Hospital in Vancouver. Her clinical focus is on developing and supporting comprehensive pediatric neurosurgery services for the province of Saskatchewan. Her academic interests include supporting the Choosing Wisely campaign as the Choosing Wisely Canada Pediatric Neurosurgery representative, supporting resident education via building a novel virtual case-based learning platform, and engaging in quality improvement initiatives as part of provincial pediatric neurosurgery program building. She's also privileged to have the title of mommy to two awesome young kids, and she is incredibly thankful to her supportive husband who has helped tremendously to make it all possible. So Professor Radic, the floor is all yours.
Hi guys, thanks for inviting me to come join you guys today for this Q&A session. I will share my screen and give you my slides. Let's see. Share. Can you guys see these?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, great. So I'll just sort of talk about myself a little bit. I have a bit of, everyone always asks where you're from, and I've moved and lived all over. So when I was 12, I moved to the Middle East and lived in Bahrain for pretty much the rest of my childhood until I went to university. So Bahrain's a little desert island next to Saudi Arabia. My dad worked in Saudi Arabia and would drive across this bridge every day for work. I went to high school there. I went to a British high school, and my life really did look like this. This is a pretty classic view. It's a small island, desert. There's beautiful, depending on who you talk to, Arabian Gulf versus Persian Gulf, and lots of little islands and camels and dows, and this is the tree of life that lives on its own in the desert there. It's a really nice experience growing up there, and I had an excellent high school experience. So, but I had to I could go anywhere after high school because my parents were still living there in Bahrain, and the university there, it wasn't something I was really interested in staying in Bahrain for university. So I ended up really thinking a brochure looked beautiful in Miami to study marine science. And then I went off to do marine science in Miami and got to study dolphin behavior and get credit to learn how to scuba dive. And I joined the rowing team, and we were rowing in the mornings with manatees and dolphins. It was all very fun and fanciful. But a lot of what I studied involved plankton and seagrass and wasn't quite as wonderful as the scuba diving and dolphin side of things on a day-to-day basis. And I really thought the oceans were beautiful and important, but I couldn't see myself doing a career as a marine scientist and still being happy at the end of that. So like Nicole, I don't have anyone in medicine in my family, and I kind of deviated more towards medicine on my own, and ended up applying to medical school, and I got into a couple places and ended up choosing Queen's. And my parents are Queen's alumni for English and engineering. So I had this sort of incentive to go back there for medical school, and I loved it there. It was a really nice experience. I was a varsity fencer. I did all sorts of random sports through my training, but I did fencing and then finished medical school there, and and really kind of fell in love with the neurosciences during medical school. I did a research project in neuroscience and really enjoyed that. And I started doing neurosurgery electives. There's not a neurosurgery residency program at Queen's, but there's a long history of neurosurgeons who've gone to medical school at Queen's. So I had a lot of people kind of mentoring me, not directly at the university, but via electives. It was nice. So I ended up matching to Halifax, which I am completely in love with the East Coast, and Halifax was a wonderful place to train. I felt very supported and under a strong mentorship from the group there. And the East Coast is just gorgeous. There's so much to see and do. There's like whale watching that's just spectacular off of Briar Island on the west side of Nova Scotia. And then there's, beautiful canoe camping and portaging up in the middle of the province in Kejimkujik, and then these beautiful beaches that, some great surfing and gorgeous like white sand, turquoise waters, and these cool rocks you can kayak around, and Cape Breton Trail. It's just a very unique part of the country. Everyone in the West calls the East Coast Toronto, but there's a lot that happens east of Toronto, and it's nice to kind of be on the coast there. So that was really beautiful. And then I wanted to do something academic, but I wasn't sure that I wanted to do a PhD, and I had heard about this MPH program at Harvard. So I applied for that and got in and decided to do that and learn a little bit of quantitative method skills and how to do clinical research a little bit better. And had a great year there. It was wonderful. I learned a lot about doing clinical research and just the nitty gritty of like statistical analysis and how to, critically appraise papers. And it was just, they went through it in a lot more detail than you do kind of appraising journal articles in residency. So I got a lot of experience there. I wrote a few papers as well while I was out there. And as part of, one of my projects, I went to Chile and analyzed the healthcare system, in particular how the neurosurgery services are delivered in the country there, as in a kind of third world moving towards first world country, and that was a really cool experience. So you got these really neat experiences on the east in Boston and through the Harvard kind of connections that I wouldn't have had. And then there's a Nova Scotia connection because the tree there, the Christmas tree comes from Nova Scotia every year in the Boston Commons, and they light it up every year. Back when there was a Halifax explosion, like a long time ago now, over a century ago, the Boston sent a whole bunch of people to come and help after this big explosion. And so every year in gratitude for that, they send a Christmas tree cut down from the East Coast down and sent to Boston. So. And then, after that, I did a fellowship at BC Children's. I knew I wanted to do pediatrics pretty early, early to halfway through my residency. I really loved the patient population, and I like the procedures, and I like working with kids and families. I find the work just feels very meaningful to me, and I enjoy the day-to-day of it a lot. So I went to BC, and a similarly stunning part of the country. A lot of, Vancouver is like a city where you can go and surf and then go skiing in the same day. So it's kind of cool. There's lots of amazing trees and scenery and surfing and some gorgeous nearby stuff. And the BC Children's it was a really great place to train. I had a wonderful experience there too with great mentors. And I think that was a theme for me, is I chose places that I connected with, and as a result, I feel like I fit in well with these programs and had good mentorship there. So now I'm here in Sask, and it's similarly beautiful in a different way, but it's still lots of unexpected beauty. I think I always thought of Saskatchewan as being kind of flat and boring and farmland. And yes, there's a lot of flat, but there's also a lot of minimalist beauty even in that flat farmland. And there's some amazing skies, the Northern Lights are here a lot through the winter. You can go Northern Light hunting, and there's these dark sky reserves. The darkest dark sky reserve in Canada is in Grasslands National Park. Here's an authentic out there. So it's pretty gorgeous. This is Saskatoon with the river. And here, some of the biggest sand dunes in Canada are in Saskatchewan as well. And you have some gorgeous lake country up in the north as well, where you can go canoeing and canoe camping too. So, and then this is a kind of unique phenomenon in Saskatchewan. They have like a purple sand beach that comes up every now and then, where there's garnet that washes up on the beaches, and you get purple sand beaches. It's kind of cool. So some badlands as well. And so here I am now in Saskatchewan. I'm a bit of an explorer, a nomad. I don't really have a hometown, but it's kind of fun that way. I get to go try new things all the time. So this is my personal kind of side. So I met my husband when I was in early third year residency, and we got married in my last year of residency. And I was pregnant when I wrote my Royal College exam. And so like, this is me like well into my third trimester, and I didn't look that pregnant. I think my baby's just hide in my pelvis, and the scrubs just are pretty baggy, so you can hardly tell that I'm pregnant, but I am like 2 months from delivering there. And my husband, I took most of the parental leave. I had my son, Luke, when I was a fellow. So I was 4 months in. I started in July. He was born in October. And then I took the 17 weeks that are for the birth parent. And then my husband took the rest of the parental leave. And I don't know how I would have done it without him. He was just amazing and so supportive. And like, it really made it possible to, you know, finish fellowship and be able to do that kind of crazy 1 and 2 call that it required to finish. So we did do on the 1 and 2 days I wasn't on call, we went and explored BC a lot, and that was really fun. And then I started my staff job here, and a year and a half into my staff job, my daughter was born. So this is Clara, and I took 7 months for her. Part of me kind of wishes I took more in hindsight, but it felt like a lot because I've taken a lot less with my son, and I had a wonderful mat leave and really enjoyed it. There's a lot less stress when you're a staff person to go on mat leave because you have a job to come back to and you have some security. So that was really nice. And we've been exploring Saskatchewan a bit. You know, here's Cypress Hills, and here's some of the local like hiking trails. And my kids now my daughter's 2 and my son is 5, so we go off exploring a lot. My daughter, she's like 3 days old. So yeah, that's here now. I think everyone who has kids obviously has it at various stages in their journey, and I kind of bring my husband up because I think there's a lot of people behind the scenes that make it possible. I think it's a really hard thing to do as a single parent. So, it would have been interesting maybe to have a single parent on here to give their perspective too, if that's even possible. I don't know how people would do it. But there's a lot of people who help make it possible to parent and be a neurosurgeon. And I feel very lucky to have a supportive husband. The other things that help me is a full-time daycare, plus we have a part-time nanny for the evenings and weekends, because my parents no longer live in Bahrain, but they only moved back a few years ago, and they live in Calgary. So my husband's family lives in the East Coast in Halifax. So we don't have family locally, which makes it a little more challenging, but it is doable. We do make use of a lot of different types of childcare to make it work. And it does work. It works for us. We're all doing pretty well. So that's great. And I show you this picture because my he's an accountant, but he's starting a business here where he's developing the sport of cycling in the province. And he's been working on building a whole bunch of cycling trail networks here and mountain biking trails that are up to Canada Cup national level standards. So he's trying to bring Saskatchewan on the national stage for cycling in the province. And he's doing some kids sport development too, where he runs kids race series over the summer. So we're making Saskatchewan home. We're feeling good about being here, and I'm happy to say it is possible to be a neurosurgeon and a mom, and to be present as a mom, and do a good job and feel proud of your work too. So it is doable. Happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Radic, and our two other panelists for these wonderful presentations and sharing your background with us. We're now going to move on to the first Q&A for about 10 minutes, and everyone is welcome to ask questions, whether you like to do it on your microphone, unmute yourself, or you would like to type in the chat. I'll begin with the first one. This is addressed for all three of our panelists. So if you were to advise someone on a surgical career and also to maintain their personal relationships, what sort of advice would you give them?
I can start. We can all kind of chime in, I'm sure. So I think one of the things that I would advise is obviously to make sure your partner's supportive and on board, because it does require a lot of sacrifice from your partner to support a career in medicine and in surgery particularly. So you do need someone who feels valued and like an integral part of that process. Otherwise it can put a lot of strain on the relationship. And it's important for your partner to feel equally important to you, like that their careers and dreams and goals are equally important to yours. And you have to find a way to, you know, you may not all be able to have your dreams at the same time, but you should be able to have your dreams and just alternate and figure it out together and feel like you're both valued and important, so that you can make it work. I think that the trouble comes in when one person kind of drives everything and the other person doesn't have as much of a voice or a say. And so if you always take that give and take turns kind of, then it works. Always make time for date night too. You never should be too, if you're too busy for date night, you're too busy.
Sure, I can just add another comment there. I completely agree with everything Dr. Radic has said. The relationships are going to be what sustains you through this program. But I think being very transparent in when you have a very demanding like workload coming up, if you're going to be on service and it's going to be, 1 and 2 call, communicating that early on so you can do your best to plan around it is very important, rather than springing this on someone last minute. Also, I try my best to make the most of like the in-between minutes. So when I'm commuting like to and from work, I don't have a long commute, but I will almost always call my mom a couple times a week. And she knows in advance that if I'm calling, it could be a very abrupt ending to the phone call, but I try my best to, reach out to friends and family and stay connected to people, but capturing those little minutes that might otherwise be considered just like wasted time, and do my best to check in. And again, just be upfront with kind of everybody in my life that, this is going to be a very busy time. So if you don't hear from me, like, keep checking in. It's nothing personal. Things are just, I will get back to you as soon as time allows. And yes, totally agree with date night. Very, very important.
Yeah, I think I can kind of add to that. I agree with everything that you guys have said as well. But also another thing, when I was in medical school, where most of you guys are now, I am lucky to have a lot of family around, lots of brothers and sisters-in-law, and I did them a lot of favors in medical school when I had a little more time. So I would take, all the cousins for a weekend of sleepovers, and then just with the expectant, when I'm in residency, you guys are going to have to pay me back. So that was something, just form a lot of strong connections and support network. And I feel like as I got closer to the end of medical school, I prepped them to let them know that neurosurgery was what I was going to pursue, and that it would be busy and it was going to take a village to get through it. And they were all kind of ready for it. So that was one of my strategies as well. half kidding, but half serious.
Nicole, I'm just going to build on that because I am very fortunate. My husband is in a very demanding career as well, and we do everything we can to support his, professional development. But I'm in Nova Scotia and my husband's employment is in BC. So I am by no means a single mom, but there are periods of time where my husband will be in BC for 2 or 3 weeks. And with COVID, that has certainly had to become longer periods of time where he is away. So again, relying on your village and reaching out to neighbors and close friends and my colleagues in the program, and just being very transparent, like, this is going to be a really like rough patch for me. Alex is in BC, and I was like 8 months pregnant and I have 2 dogs. So I'd be getting up for dog walks at 4:30 in the morning, and that's only so sustainable. So letting people know in advance and like asking for those little favors, like, is someone available to just go and check on the dogs if I'm on call. You try to make use of all the other services, like hiring someone for cleaning and dog walking, etc. But at times you just have to reach out, and asking for help can be something that's really hard. Like a strong, independent person, and I want to be able to do this, as much of this myself, and not be a burden to others. But I think it is really, really important to just invite people into your like your world. In a way, your success is a reflection of everybody around you. And so people are very happy to contribute if they know that they're making something a little bit easier on you. So I think being upfront and accepting of people's help and support is something that is not only helpful, I think it's vital to get through this.
I have a question if I can ask. Awesome. I'm Heather. I'm a third-year medical student at the University of Manitoba, very interested in neurosurgery, so hopefully applying next year. It's amazing to see some female representation, especially women with families, so thank you so much for sharing all of this. I was wondering if you guys could speak to any specific challenges you guys have faced with having a family during your training. And also, is there like a good time to start a family in your career, and what your thoughts are on that?
I think I can start. I like just going through medical school. I did have a couple classmates that had babies in medical school, and usually like our school was very accommodating for taking a year, for them to take a year as a break year and have a maternity leave for a year. And then just from being in residency, I have heard that taking a year off in residency is usually, most of residencies are under union, so they do have maternity leave. So it might also be one of the easier times, but I'm not a staff neurosurgeon, so maybe that's the best time. I don't know. I don't think any time in your life is like the perfect time or an easy time to have a baby. Babies are definitely game changers, but I think it's definitely worth it, no matter what stage you're in, if that's what you want to do, for sure. So
sure, I can quickly speak to the having a baby in residency. I am very happy with my decision. I feel very well supported by my colleagues and by the department. Kind of ironically, or I guess I was a little surprised to find out, I was the first neurosurgery resident to take a maternity leave in Dal's neurosurgery program. But that being said, our program director, Dr. Gwynedd Pickett, has been nothing but supportive the entire way through. So the maritime resident doctors have it written into their contract, like it's very clearly defined what your maternity leave can look like. Dr. Pickett was very gracious in saying, take as much time as you want. Like there's absolutely no rush to come back. Like whenever you're ready, do that. Don't come back because you feel that there is like an animosity in any way. I'm planning on taking 6 months, and I will see where things are at in September. And if I want to take longer, then I will just look to join in at a point that makes sense with respect to like our block system. But like I said, planning on 6 months, and then there's a whole bunch of wonderful things already built into the contract. So for me, I felt like this was a perfect time. I'm at the end of my second year, so I feel comfortable enough working like in the department. I had, some great surgical experience and exposure and felt comfortable with that. Kind of past that immense learning curve in the beginning. So feel comfortable coming back into third year when the responsibility is a bit higher.
So I can talk a little bit too. So there really isn't a great time to have kids. I mean, society is kind of set up where, you know, the work of having children is kind of unrecognized and unpaid and kind of unvalued, except on a internal, meaningful level. And so it always kind of detracts a little bit from the rest of your life because it's another even more than full-time job to be a parent. So, you know, there's no good time. I think at some point you want to have kids, you just got to have them. There's probably, like, every phase has its, you know, things that are going to be hard to have kids in and things that are going to be easier. One of the good things about waiting to fellowship for me was I didn't have children and I was studying for the Royal College exam, which made it easier to focus. But I think you could still do it. You just would need like a very supportive childcare network to help with your studying habits in the evenings, or you'd have to find time to study during the day and then take some time with the kids. But like I know a lot of people just really struggle in that last year who have young children, but it is doable. And a lot of them do pass, and ultimately you don't need to ace it, you just need to pass. So that's totally fine. And it's doable. I think, I don't know, I had a baby in fellowship. If I could change that, I feel like there's pluses and minuses. I was getting older, so I wanted a baby and I just didn't really care anymore. I just wanted to have the baby. So it worked for me timing wise, but it wasn't a great time to have a baby because you're trying to get a job and you're trying to impress people. And there were, like, I was the first pregnant fellow and the first first person to take maternity leave in fellowship. And I got, you know, some kind of, I kind of nudged it, you know, my program was very supportive, but there was definitely, like, neurosurgery is very male dominated. And so you do kind of break the glass ceiling a little bit by pushing this and showing that it can be done. And there was that, like, I want to take the time, but I also want a job afterwards. And so I took a little bit of time. I also kind of underestimated, I think, how much work it would be to be a parent, especially with a newborn. And I thought, 4 months, that'll be lots of time and I'll be okay. And I was, you know, you're still full on breastfeeding at that point. So there was a huge transition back to work to 1 and 2 call. And I think, 4 months is short. And the other thing that's tough when you go to only take that short a time is that there's not a lot of childcare options for infants. Like, it's hard to find good daycares for anyone under a year, and really now 18 months because of the extension of maternity leave to 18 months. There's fewer daycares that'll take kids under 18 months. They are out there, but definitely under a year is tougher. So there's logistical things that I never thought about. And it worked with my husband kind of taking some more of the leave, but I still had to figure out how to pump and how to, there was no pumping room at the hospital. They never really thought about that. I shared an office, so I didn't have a private space. So I was offered to go to the NICU to pump, but that was great as a fellow. But if you're in the OR or you're in your office, you're going to walk across the whole hospital to go to a pumping break. It just ended up being that it was easy. I don't know. It was hard logistically to figure that out. So I think you kind of start pushing it and showing that this infrastructure is needed, but it's, if you're the first one doing it, it's kind of harder to do it. So it all worked out. My son's fine. We're all doing well. It was definitely a hard year, but I did get a job afterwards, so that worked. But as a staff person, there's also pluses and minuses. The nice thing is you have job security when you come back. The tough side of it is that you're trying to get your career established and trying to build your kind of early career, hit the ground running, and then you kind of have this hiccup where you take some time off, and you do notice that when you come back, you're a little rusty, you've got, a lot of things have moved on in that time you're away, and then you have to kind of jump back on the treadmill, and it's doable, but it is definitely a mental shift, and everyone does it. And honestly, I think it'll happen that way if you take 4 months, it'll happen that way if you take a year, and take the time you need. I actually totally agree with that. And I think people should take the year personally. But I think 6, I also took less, so it's easy for me to say I would support more, but I do think, there's some pros of coming back early, in that you're you're also you're not quite as rusty because you took less time and you can move along earlier, but I don't know, you'll catch up eventually, I think. So yeah, I think in the end, the other thing I think is I do actually really believe in sharing parental leaves with partners. I think the first 6 months, if you're breastfeeding, are pretty critical, but after that, it's really easy to pump a little bit and they're on solids and you can start to stagger it. And my personal feeling is we're not going to necessarily have great equality until we're sharing the parental leave to some degree, and guys have to take similar career sacrifices to take a leave and look after kids as women do. And I think otherwise there's always going to be a little bit of a subconscious bias against women, and at some point you just kind of need that balance. But I think the bias isn't really fair, and it's not okay, but it is there. I've experienced it personally. So I think, ultimately, if everyone takes a bit of leave, there will be more of a bias against young people as opposed to a bias against women personally. But it's okay. You have to drive what you want. You have to drive your goals. It is going to be really hard, but it also is going to be really rewarding. And I love my 2 kids. I love my work. I feel like I kind of hit the jackpot. It was hard, but I'm here in this awesome position. I kind of have it all, and I feel really grateful that it all worked out in the end, hard things or not. And so it's doable. It may not be a pretty road, but you can totally make it your own road and get to where you want to go if you just kind of muscle through it, drive your own path.
Thank you. Do we have any other question from the audience?
I have a question.
Yes, please, yeah.
Hi, my name's Britta. I'm a third-year medical student at McGill. My question is a bit of a glance into the future, I suppose, for all of you. But I'm often told that the difference between most surgical specialties and neurosurgery in terms of having a family is that it's sort of more challenging all throughout your career. It's not just that residency is really full on. And so this is something that I think about frequently when trying to consider a career in neurosurgery, because you want it to be this career that you have obviously for a very long time. So I wondered if you could speak to this and sort of what you've heard maybe from your mentors and what you're starting to experience now. Thank you.
So just to clarify, the question is it really does it get easier? Is that the question? Like once you're
it makes sense to me. Residency is so full on, having kids.
Yes.
But I'm often told, oh no, but in neurosurgery as a career, it's always that demanding. So it's always much more challenging to have a family. And I know it's a super hard question to answer without experiencing these things, but.
Well, I can tell you a little bit about my experience.
Yeah.
There are a few women in neurosurgery. They're becoming more and more common, but we're certainly the minority. I think it's like 10 to 15%. From my side of things, it's definitely challenging. Like I think probably we have it a little harder than our male colleagues with stay-at-home wives. But I think if you have a working partner, if you're male or female, but you have a working partner and you're both trying to juggle careers and kids, there's definitely challenges there. And I think neurosurgery hours are long. One of the things I like about working in Saskatchewan is there's not a big commute. So you're kind of like, I start work around 8 each day, and I often can try to get home by 6. So unless I'm on call or if I'm in the OR, and that usually happens at least once or twice a week. And so, there's definitely days where you're running late or you're starting earlier than that if you're in the OR. But if I even start at 8, even an OR day, it starts at 8. So if I roll in the door at like 7:50, throw on scrubs and run to the OR, I'm on time. And that means I can drop my kids off at daycare at 7:30. So my husband and I will share who does drop off. So I see them in the mornings. I have breakfast with them. I drop them off at daycare. Then I go to work. I spend my work day. If I'm running late, we have a part-time nanny to help out in the evenings to help with picking them up from daycare, but my daycare finishes at 5:45. So I'll pick them up, or my husband will, between the two of us at around 5:45, or we'll get a nanny, and then we'll have dinner together, and then it's bedtime, and then you really need that me time at the end of the day. So that's kind of my day. And then the work part in the middle of the day, 8 to 6 is long. If you're talking, most people would work 9 to 5, but it's not that bad. It's not as bad as what a lot of people kind of tell you neurosurgery will be. I think one of the things that we've as a family find hard is less of the, structured long days. It's the unpredictability that's sometimes tough. I find the culture of neurosurgery is often quite old school. So there's this sense that everyone has to be available for their patients all the time. And you need to kind of be willing to drop everything to show up and do whatever emergency comes in. And there's not as much clear cross coverage. And some programs are building that and developing that, but a lot of it is you're kind of your own island, building your own thing. And I think one thing that we'll probably see as more younger people who want work-life balance as what will develop is that we'll start to cross cover more. And so you can, when you're not on call, you're really not on, and you can plan, I will be home at this time. Whereas now, I might get a consult at 4 and then have to run late and need to depend on my husband to pick the kids up. And it's a little less predictable. So I think the predictability side of it is the part that I think it puts the most kind of strain on things, especially because when you have kids, you have to be predictable. Somebody has to pick them up from daycare, someone has to give them dinner. So there's this, as a family, you have to be predictable. And so I think it's hard to be the default parent as a neurosurgeon right now in the current culture. I think you kind of need a partner who's able to kind of be the default if you're running late and go and get the kids, or else you need to have family, a support network, or a hired nanny to kind of be there to grab them and just always have that flexibility. And that's changing, I think. I think that will change, but it's certainly the current culture. And I think that makes it harder. But I think, the more people who want a better structure and balance, I think it will happen. It will change that way. It's just still in process of evolving. So.
Thanks, Dr. Radic. I can just quickly add to what I see with my staff. We have 2 female neurosurgeons at Dalhousie, Dr. Pickett and Dr. Weeks. Both have children. Dr. Weeks has 4 kids, Dr. Pickett has 2. But what's nice in looking at the broader sense of the department, every single surgeon has kids. So, everybody at one point or another is going to get the text message from their kid that pulls them away, whether you're male or female. And so, our culture is very supportive. There's definitely been times one of our staff will be giving a case presentation and someone will walk in with their kids and just sit quietly in the back. And there's the department keeps going, but everybody is supportive. You don't make a big deal about it, but everybody is there to help one another. And so maybe at Dal, we're leading that curve, or at the front edge of that curve, which is really, really nice. And that gave me a lot of hope for my own experience coming up and what that's going to look like, looking ahead to, this maternity leave and whether or not there's a second maternity leave and what that's going to look like when I'm chief. So knowing that there's other people that have, as Dr. Radic said, already broke that glass ceiling and who are actively changing the culture as, my education is progressing is really reassuring.
And from the residency perspective, for having kids, my kids are school aged, they're into activities and they have events at school and that sort of thing. And I think as someone who had a career before that was a little bit more predictable, so I had kids also when I was a pharmacist, it was more 9 to 5 and I made the schedule, so it was really predictable from that perspective. I think I would say that I feel really lucky and to be in the residency and have kids and kind of have both of those things. And those are both things that I really love. And I don't think that I may work a few more hours a week now in residency. And I'm a junior resident, so probably the most that I'll ever work. But it's incredibly fulfilling. And I don't feel that I my kids are going without a parent who's involved in school or sees their activities or is there on weekends or that sort of thing. And I don't think they would feel that way either. So I think you can do it all. You just have to really know that this is what you love, because it felt like longer days when I was in a job that I didn't like and didn't enjoy, as opposed to something that's incredibly fulfilling and awesome to be in. So I think that's really important when you're choosing a more demanding career. So.
Thank you so much for a great discussion. Now going back to the personal relationship, a question that is sometimes asked is whether having a partner or spouse in a similar field, either medical or surgical, could be helpful in building a personal relationship. What's your take on the topic of relationships?
I guess I would just quickly say my husband's not in medicine, and I think I am incredibly grateful for that. I am glad to have a conversation that's not medically oriented when I get home. So just to hear about another part of life is kind of refreshing, because it can be all-consuming. And I should say it could easily be all-consuming. All you do is talk about medicine or your patients or what's next or what you've done or what your next exam is. And so it's kind of refreshing to have somebody pull you out of that and remind you that there is like a whole other world out there.
Yeah, I mean, my husband's not in medicine, he's an accountant. So you can absolutely have a strong relationship outside of medicine too. I know dual physician families who make it work and who are happy. Dr. Weeks has a orthopedic surgeon husband, like people, they have 4 kids, between the two of them, they figure it out. There's people who make it work even with 2 physician families. It's certainly harder. And probably the biggest strain is, I don't know if it's certainly harder from a relationship perspective, but from a career perspective, it's in neurosurgery job market's pretty tough. And I think it must be even harder for people who have 2 tough job market situations to try to both find work in the same place. So people do it though. So I think you can figure it out, but I think there is, that would be challenging. I think everything has its challenges though. I think the main thing is finding a person who can support you and who you can feel, people who you can mutually admire each other, respect each other, and be willing to kind of be that support for each other is the key. If that person's in medicine, then so be it. They'll understand you better in some ways, your career. And if they're not in medicine, also so be it. Then it's someone who will have probably nicer hours than you and can help with the parenting side of things better. But also who will give you, like you said, a refreshing outsider's perspective on life, really. So.
Yeah, I think like my husband's not in medicine. He works a week away in Alberta still, actually, and a week home. So we have a nanny that helps us out during the week away, just because of the early mornings of residency and getting the kids off to school. And yeah, I think it just takes any partner that's going to support you and kind of see your dream, and then lots of explaining, because he doesn't understand like call or post call or what all this sort of stuff means. So just explaining what it's actually going to be like and making sure they know what you're getting into. And then at that point you decide whether they're going to be with you or not with you. But I mean, he was very supportive the whole way, but it's just, you just have to really explain to them what you're getting yourself into by committing to this residency, because residency is long and it's challenging, and it's a lifestyle for a few years of your life for sure. So
thank you.
Any other questions? We have one prepared, but just opening the floor.
I do have a question, if we have time for it.
Absolutely.
Great, thanks. So hi, my name is Amanda. I just finished my first year at UBC. And I was wondering if there was any pressure, whether internal or external, to stay sharp and keep up your skills or on top of research while you took time away, and how you sort of navigated that.
So as mentioned, like in my current mat leave, there was zero expectation for me to attend any lectures or grand rounds or any of our teaching. Oh, sorry,
I think, yeah, the fire alarm went
all
off.
cooking downstairs. Smoke detector went off. My apologies.
No worries, no worries.
Reinforces that this is my time to focus on the number one thing, which is my son. And so I am incredibly grateful for that. I do enjoy our curriculum lectures, and that's Wednesday mornings at 10. Like our academic half day is Wednesdays. I don't attend case rounds and I don't attend grand rounds, which are at 7 and 8, just because at that time in the morning, between dog walks and getting Finn like settled and fed and everything else, it's too chaotic. So I don't put that expectation upon myself. But usually by 10 a.m., things have settled down. And if I can attend, then I'm happy to sign on and just listen passively to a lecture. But again, that's of my own choosing. The department does not expect that. And usually they'll tell me to like politely go away. I don't need to be there, but I can sit and listen, and I'm there because I want to be.
Yeah, I think like you have EI or whatever, but it's an unpaid leave of absence. So you're technically on leave, and there is no like expectation that you work during that leave. You are working through parenting. So I think I took leave as a staff, I took leave as a fellow. It sounds like Jenna took leave as a resident. I can tell you from my experience, there was zero pressure to work. If there's any pressure, it's internal. You feel like, oh, maybe I should be working, but nobody else is like expecting it. And honestly, like being able to just focus on your kid and like being in there, that is a whole mental shift to becoming a parent. And it is there's plenty of work. So I found it really like kind of awesome actually to focus on my kids and just be a mom for that period of time. It was really precious time, and I am really like glad I didn't do work in that period, and I could just kind of focus on being a parent. And yeah, so no expectation. If you do decide you want to do some work, probably no one would stop you, but you won't really get I don't think you'd get much pressure to do it.
Yeah, and I think once you get into like the medical world, you'll know that everybody like takes leaves all the time, whether it's for fellowship or research or a year sabbatical to do a crazy thing and travel around the world or something. And it's really just the world goes on for that year, and they come back and everybody chats about it in the OR, and it's great. And I think people take leaves all the time for all different kinds of reasons, so it's pretty accepted.
Nicole, you bring up such a good point. Like for my maternity leave, even though I'm taking 6 months, I will technically drop back to graduate with the cohort that's the year behind me. But there's, again, no trouble with that, because when you look at the structure of Dalhousie's program, people in their 4th year, that's a dedicated research year. Some people will choose to do a master's degree and add on an extra year anyways, so they would technically drop back to the cohort beneath them. Some people will go on and do a PhD, so they're away for 3, 4, 5 years and then come back. For myself, I already had a master's degree and had no plan to do another master's or PhD. So me dropping back a year is just as if I had taken like time for research or any other leave. So it's well accepted in our program.
Yeah, I kind of feel like, I know I said residency has pluses and minuses, but I feel like it's a pretty good time to have kids in some ways. Like you can take a year without that much repercussion. You're pretty supported. You're not in the fellow stage where you're trying to like get a job actively. You're kind of, I don't know, early residency. I think that's a good window.
Yeah, and just a quick comment about the pay. So under the Maritime Resident Doctor's contract, I have 17 weeks at 93% of my regular salary, and then I have EI after that. So, it is pretty well compensated for the majority of the time that I'm planning to take off. But if I wanted to extend that out for a year, it would just be EI after that 17 weeks.
Yeah, that was true in fellowship too. And that's why I ended up taking the 17 weeks, because otherwise we'd lose it, and it was decent. So yeah, it's, I think when you're a student, either a resident or a fellow, you'll have that. I will caution you guys, it depends on what you do. If you go to the US for fellowship, their parental leave policies are obviously much different, and probably you would not be supported to have, well, you could have a kid, but you'd get like, I remember I was interviewing and I was pregnant, so I was actively interested in what the fellowships were about. And like one was like proudly advertising their 1 month parental leave policy. And I was like, oh my God. So I think, fellowship, if you're going to do a US fellowship, would probably be quite challenging, but it's doable. It just, hard.
Thank you so much for that awesome discussion about the last question. So actually the question that we had prepared next to ask aligns really well with Kelsey's question, who also messaged me. So it has to do with maternity leave. So this is, of course, open to all the panelists. How does maternity leave work in a neurosurgical career in your, in the specific program or faculty that you are at? Like more so as in the logistics, such as, how does one obtain it? How long is it? Is there a limit to a number of maternity leaves one can take? And, if a mother does take maternity leave, does that influence the length of the residency program in any way? So lots of questions in there, but if you could, answer some of that, that would be great.
Yeah, I think some of the questions were already answered in the course of the discussion, but just quickly to recap. So maternity leave, as I mentioned, is built into your resident contract. I can take 17 weeks at like almost full pay and then EI afterwards. The contract itself states that I need to advise my program director that I was going to be taking maternity leave before I was 5 months pregnant. I told Dr. Pickett when I was around 4 months pregnant. I had just finished writing my Royal College Surgical Foundations exam. So I wanted to get the exam done first and then present this new change to my schedule. As far as I know, there is no limit to the number of maternity leaves that you can take, although every time you do, you are going to be extending your program in a sense. If you took maybe the minimum amount, then you might be able to write that off and graduate in the 6-year time window. But I think you'd be making it very, very challenging for yourself at every step, like leading up to your Royal College exams. So acknowledging that you probably are adding at least a year to your training might influence like you taking a more extended maternity leave. And again, that's completely acceptable. I'm trying to think of other logistics. For myself, I was just told that the day that my maternity leave started, I needed to call the CMPA and let them know that I would be taking leave so that I could actually have some of my CMPA fees reimbursed. And I received an email, like the administrative side of things is all taken care of through the program, but I received an email the day or two after just saying that my medical license was basically on hold for the period of time that I was going to be away. And then just to give the program a couple weeks notice before I come back and to let them know if my anticipated return date is going to hold or if I would like to change that. That being said, acknowledging that I told my program at around 4 months, hearing it from the program director's side of things, they do appreciate knowing early, because it allows them time to plan out whether or not they need additional coverage on service. Because at 28 weeks, you are no longer taking overnight call, which is a really beautiful benefit of the maritime resident doctor's contract. I'm not too sure if that's standard in other centers, but at Dal, after 28 weeks, there's no overnight call. And then it depends on your rotation, how they interpret that, whether or not you could do call till 5 p.m. or 10 p.m. or midnight. The services that I were on at the time when I was, 6, 7, 8 months pregnant, I was on ortho spine and neurosurgery, both of which were really lovely and just said no call. So I guess I had 3 extra months where I was, kind of in a good position where I didn't have to stress about being in the hospital overnight, because being on your feet for the, long shifts does start to take a physical toll. And I had a very straightforward, I guess by comparison, relatively easy pregnancy, but you still hit these like walls of fatigue that it's just like next level. You're like, I've never been so tired in my life, and I'm going to get up and do it again tomorrow. So just factoring all of those things in, I hope I've answered most of the questions that you posed, Pedro.
Yeah, that's a nice comment, actually. I don't know if that was there when I was a resident or not. I didn't take mat leave in my residency, so I'm not sure, but as a fellow I can say it's lawless. So as a staff as well, you're an independent contractor as a staff, so there's no rules around call or protections at the end of pregnancy. I worked till 40 weeks both times and did call right till the end. So I did 1 and 2 call as a fellow. I think I got 1 week where they're like, we'll give you 1 week of no call right before the end. So it wasn't malicious. It's just there was no contract. You're a resident, there's a contract, you have like stipulations, when afterwards you really don't. So you kind of have to tell them what you're comfortable with. And I think there's good evidence now that, overnight shifts and overnight call is actually risky late in pregnancy, and doctors have a higher incidence of preterm labor, and because they have that long hours and night shifts. So, it should be supported. And I think the residency programs are going in the right direction, and hopefully the culture will follow it throughout. But it's another perk of if you're going to have kids, having them in residency, I guess you get more protections.
Okay, great. So one of the questions that I think may be interesting is, as a mother and a neurosurgeon, would you advise your children to pursue neurosurgery? Maybe we can have a discussion about that. Dr. Pendleton, maybe you could share some insights first.
Yeah, I try and force them into medicine all the time. They both, my daughter wants to be a teacher and because she likes the summer, and my son wants to be a zookeeper because he likes animals. But I still have hope that one day they'll join me in the OR. That's kind of my dream. So I hope I can work until I'm 90 and just get forced out or something like that when I'm into my old age. That's kind of my retirement plan. My husband is going to retire when he's 50 and start golfing full time. So, and I said I'm going to work forever. So hopefully I'll join one of my kids in the OR someday.
That was funny. Thanks, Nicole. You know what? I'm not a big believer in like pushing kids into any one career path. I think I personally love my job. I could not do this job without loving it and deriving a significant amount of meaning out of my work. I think the hours are long, but they go by quickly. And that was true as a resident and a fellow and a staff. When I tell people how much hours I work and how much I used to work, and yes, there were long nights and days, but honestly, like I enjoy my work. So it goes by way faster than when I did like my internal medicine rotation or whatever. So I think surgery is longer hours, but they do go by faster. And so from my side, I don't have anything that I would say, oh, you shouldn't do that, or I would personally redirect them away from it. But I would kind of encourage them to explore and feel really comfortable with whatever their choice is in the end that they want to do. And and feel like that's what they want, make sure they're willing to go for it. If that's medicine, awesome. If it's something else, awesome. Like as long as they've thought about it and they've considered other things and they've looked at everything and they've made a decision, then that's what they should do. So yeah, I think, it's not, I wouldn't push them away. I also would support whatever they decide.
And yeah, just quickly, I would say I would hope that my child would pursue whatever makes them happy. I love my career choice, and if that inspires them, great. If they don't enjoy the balance that I have in my life, then I would never wish this on them. But really growing up with a mom who is like a lifetime academic and a lifetime student, I hope I instill a love of learning and that they'll carry that forward into whatever their passion is.
Okay, thank you so much for a great discussion. So if the panelists don't mind, so since we started even a little bit later, so is it fine with you if you just go over with extra 5-10 minutes? Is that fine? Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. So the next question I have actually is a fun question, kind of. So could you please share with us one funny or interesting story regarding your children's or family's reaction to your career as a neurosurgeon?
Well, I've got a funny, this one was kind of funny. My kids are still pretty little. They're 5 and 2. And when we lived in Vancouver for my fellowship, one of my current residents used to be a medical student at UBC. So Brian for Nicole. And so we were family friends actually in BC. That's kind of random. But so my son, who was a baby then, but still kind of grew up basically with knowing Brian and his daughter Adele. And so and Brian then matched to neurosurgery after we moved to Saskatoon. And I told him that Brian was going to be, Mommy was going to be his teacher, and I was going to help teach him to also be a neurosurgeon. And my son was like, that can't be. Only girls can be neurosurgeons. He couldn't have the concept of a male neurosurgeon. Was like, and then he's like, well, I can't be a doctor because boys can't be doctors. I'm like, only girls can be doctors. I'm like, okay, but this is not the point. No, boys can be anything they want to be. And I'm like, well, this is a backwards conversation. So, I think you do kind of, like I said, break barriers just by doing it and showing that it's possible.
That's really funny. I know Brian as well. He's a resident a year above me. So that's his daughter is a little firecracker too. She has some good one-liners. One of my recently, so my daughter's in grade 1 and she's starting to have, friends that she talks to and best friends and this sort of thing. And one of her friends' moms texted me not too long ago and said, what do you do for work? Because Olivia told Danica that you cut heads. Are you she maybe thought I was a hairdresser or a criminal, I don't know. But that's what she described me as. And then also unrelated, her teacher came up to me the other day and probably surprised to see me because I don't often kids nowadays get off so early from school, maybe 3:20 sometimes, which is really unrealistic for most parents to pick up their kids. But their teacher said, oh, Olivia's so happy to see you. She says you're never around because you're always on call, because I had been doing a frequent amount of call that time. But she's like, what do you do? So they kind of think I'm just a neglectful criminal, but we always have a good laugh when we talk about it, and they promise me that they're both well-adjusted kids. So I think we're doing something right.
Nicole, I was going to say, I really look forward to the drawings that Finn will do in the future, when it's draw your family and there's going to be some horrible misinterpretation of what a brain surgeon is. So I look forward to putting that on the fridge and maybe fielding questions from his teacher or preschool friends and family as well. But I guess my funny story, I think about growing up, whenever I did something really clumsy or really silly. My parents would always say, well, at least she's not a neurosurgeon. And then that joke kind of carried on like through university. And so my parents used to send me, when I moved away, they'd send this like weekly daddy's little neurosurgeon photo. And it was something ridiculous from my childhood. And again, they would keep saying like, at least she's not a neurosurgeon. And now I kind of, enjoy going back through those photos. And I'm like, yeah, daddy's little neurosurgeon right here. So who knows, maybe that was like a subconscious motivator that this is what I actually want to do. But I can look back and laugh on that now. The other funny thing is, kudos to my parents. My mom is a homemaker and my dad's a logger, and my brother is starting university in the aerospace engineering. So my mom will have a neurosurgeon and a rocket scientist. So, we've got some pretty good running jokes between the two of us right now. And I look forward to carrying on that dynamic in the future.
Those are awesome stories. Thanks so much for sharing those. I guess we're coming to a close now. We don't want to keep everyone, longer than much longer than that. So maybe as kind of the final question, we can open up to the floor. Anyone who has a question they're really hoping to have answered, go ahead. Maybe you can unmute your mic and ask away. I agree, Nathan. It's hard to top that question. I think he privately messaged me. Okay. All right. If there are no other questions, then maybe I'll pass it on to someone so he can close the session.
Thank you again to our panelists. We're very grateful that you could join us today and share these very insightful stories with us. Very appreciated. So I don't know if you can see my screen or not. If you can give me a thumbs up. Yes, no, great. So this is our website. If you go on our website, you can find our YouTube channel with our previous events. You can follow us on Twitter. We're quite active on Twitter on Campsite. You can also register for our next coming event with Professor Suneet Das. This is coming up June 10th, so in a little few weeks. And the registration link is there. I'll actually share it in the chat as well. And one other surprise is that the last week of June, we're in the talks of coordinating the largest post-Carnes neurosurgery talk with about 8 to 10 incoming PGY1s. So that will also be happening. So you're all more than welcome to join us. And again, thank you again for being here. I'll just also share the registration link, and you can hopefully make it to the next one as well. Thank you again, everyone. And thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining us tonight.